Hello, hello. My name is Clare Murray, and I am delighted to welcome you today to our discussion about lateral partner hires, how to make those important hires successful, how to integrate them, how to make it a long-term valuable relationship and investment for everyone. And I am absolutely delighted to be joined today by my long-standing friend and collaborator, Stephen Rodney. Stephen, hello.
Hello, good to see
Stephen,
you.
and you too. Thank you so much for joining us today. You will be well known to anyone in the legal market as kind of the co-founder of Fox Rodney, chief exec, chair. There's pretty much nothing you haven't seen on the whole recruitment, headhunting of lateral partner space. But more importantly, now for us,
Mhm.
you have your own consultancy. Where you really focus. I mean, talk about really super focusing on what you love,
Mhm.
sort of
Mhm.
making a success of the integration of
Mhm.
lateral partners. So that's what we're going to talk about. So you are the obvious
Yeah.
person to talk about that. We're going to jump straight in. What makes a successful lateral partner hire?
Well, I think, and over a number of years, I saw many that worked and many that didn't work as well as everyone wanted to. And having done a lot of sort of analysis on this for myself before I set up IntoGreat Coaching, firms I think need to spend far more time producing strategic plans for recruitment rather than recruiting on an ad hoc basis. And I think that actually is a real key. Um, I mean, if you read some of the literature around laterals, and there is literature around laterals and what makes successful laterals, um, it's recommended that of the whole lateral process, sort of 40% should be on the pre-lateral, looking at the strategic plan, working out whether you do what you need, whether you have that internally or not, and if you don't have it internally, creating a real spec as to what you're looking for. 40% on integrating the lateral when they've actually joined, and only around 30% doing the actual recruiting, which would be it's completely different to what a lot of law firms do. So I think they recruit too much sometimes on an ad hoc basis.
Mhm.
They also, and I know having been a recruiter, this is tricky. They need to use much more structured interview questions when they're actually recruiting, based
Mhm.
on, for example, technical and leadership competence, collaborative capacity. And I know collaboration is something that is very close to your heart as well.
Yeah.
Culture, and previous firm experience.
Mm.
And they also need to use much more behavioural based questions in interviews. I give an example of a behavioural based question. Can you provide me, Mr. Candidate or Miss Candidate, with an example of when you made a bad decision? That's a behavioural based question,
Mm.
which a lot of firms would not ask. Now, the reason I say that I know it's tricky is that a lot of firms, they're selling to candidates. And as a recruiter, that's what I told people. You have to sell to your candidates. So you don't necessarily want to get into those difficult questions because you're
Mm.
worried the candidate will go, well, you approached me and I'm not going to answer all this stuff. But after the first one or two meetings, you've got to get into this stuff. So I think if you have the combination of more strategic planning and then more structured interviewing, um, and to take that to really its logical conclusion, should the partner whose department they're in, actually necessarily be the lead interviewer? Should you have trained interviewers who actually know how to interview people rather than just department heads who will just ask the same question as the next interviewer? The
Mm.
final thing I just want to say on this, which again is a little bit, people will say, really? There are some organizations that look at the departments that want to hire. And if those departments do not have a good reputation for the hires they previously made, they won't let them hire again.
Mm.
I haven't seen a law firm do that, I don't think, strategically. But I think it's something um, that perhaps law firms should look at. So just because litigation or whatever wants to hire another partner, if they've hired five previously and three have left after 2 years, there's something going wrong. And so before you let them hire again, you've got to analyze what's going on. So
So
that
let me ask you that. I mean, in your experience, I guess what are the common reasons why? the common scenarios in which lateral partner hires fail. Certainly, I have my views and experience of that, but I'm really interested to hear about yours.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there are a number of reasons. One is that the lateral hire was recruited without I'm not going to just say all the same things I've said, but there wasn't a strategic plan.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're asking lateral to come into a department which is failing, and you're looking at a lateral as a kind of savior of everything. And
Yeah,
that's virtually impossible for a
yeah.
lateral to do that.
You're
Secondly,
asking them
there's
to solve something that you haven't been able to solve yourself,
yes.
or you haven't
So
had
I
the
can
appetite.
I can remember a firm, and I wish I could name them, but I won't, which said, "Oh, we want the lateral to be able to build, 2 million quid or whatever it was." And I said, "Well, how many of your current partners build 2 million quid?" None. Well, I was like, "Well, that's just impossible. You're crazy. You're wasting your money." The second reason why sometimes they fail is that success, what is success for a lateral, is not looked at the beginning. What is going to be seen as success? I just don't mean in terms of pure numbers, but I mean in terms of how they integrate well into their firms.
Mm-hmm.
So often you'll find a lateral will be asked, well, you will be told you haven't been successful, but they've never been actually given what the definition of success is for them. And that can change depending on what kind of role they're coming into. So when we sponsored the Motive Legal 2024 report on lateral integration, this phrase contested space came up, which I hadn't heard of, but
Okay.
described a scenario. So if you're recruiting someone into a department of 6 existing partners, then the chances of success are less than if someone's coming in to be one or two, one of one or one of two, because there won't be contested space in the second example. Whereas in the first example, whilst firms assume that their current partners will all be collaborative, unless they've been really heavily involved in the recruitment, they might not be, and that has to be recognised.
And they might actually
Um,
be resentful because it
they
can
said
be,
that,
unless they've literally led, come up with the idea themselves and
yes,
led on it, they can actually feel really resentful. And they're actually waiting for it to fail,
they
looking,
are,
I'm just saying, and that, I mean, then the whole thing, yeah,
yep,
does not work
and
out.
that happens a lot. In terms of integration, there has to be a recognition that firm and cultural integration breaks down to a number of different areas. So it relates obviously to the lateral's clients, the internal market, the culture of the firm, and personal issues for the lateral. That's when we do the integration coaching. We kind of break things down to roughly those kind of four areas. And there has to be an integration plan put in place. And
Mm,
often there isn't, or even if there is, often it's something which is drafted by the firm itself, not really with the lateral's heavy input.
mm,
And there has to be a recognition that what business a lateral brings actually isn't necessarily going to lead to success. It's what previous experience a lateral has had of building business in their previous firm. Are they a team collaborative business builder? Not what they can bring on day one.
yeah.
I used to see a lot of examples of people who did bring stuff on day one. People got very excited, but then a year later, when that work kind of died out, they hadn't been
Mm,
integrated at all. And the final thing I'd say is that a lot of the studies in this area, if you don't open doors internally to potential client opportunities within 6 to 9 months, then the chances of a lateral hire working out successfully are reduced severely.
And you do need your internal systems as well, including
Yeah,
your remuneration systems to be set up
yeah.
so that it actually encourages kind of sharing opportunities and receiving them as well. So I think systemically, institutionally, you have to have that framework to support that collaboration. Otherwise, you are kind of setting people up to fail.
You are, and as one partner said to me when we were launching IntoGreat, he said he couldn't understand. He was an M&A partner. He said every lateral is a mini M&A deal, basically, for a law firm. And he said when he advised clients, when they'd signed the documents and the deal was done, they all knew that was just the end of the beginning. That wasn't the beginning of the end.
Mm,
That whereas law firms with laterals, yes, they might have good onboarding plan, but in terms of a 2 or 3 year real integration plan, and I believe it takes up to 3 years to really integrate people, they
I
may
agree.
have covenants in the first year, which stop them doing anything much. So it's really the second 2 years you've got to look at. Uh, People have to recognize it takes longer than you think. And, people have personal issues that actually interrupt their success as well, which, that's
Yeah. And
something
there
which
was
happens
there
quite a
was
lot.
some research that I read within the last year, which said that typically for the first 2 years, the newly hired lateral partner will underperform compared to the rest of the team that they've been
Yeah.
hired into, and that was the suggestion was that this is one of the reasons why people should hire teams rather than just one
Mhm.
individuals. I'm not sure that entirely stacks up, but you're right. What we very frequently see is that it's a 2 to 3 year integration process, and it's
Mhm.
not just about the client; it's about the culture, and it's about learning about the systems, integrating yourself in the culture and the local community within the firm. Um,
Yeah.
as well as sort of delivering. I always remember something you said to me that really stuck with me years ago. Every lateral partner business case, it's a guesstimate, you know. And I think part of the problem is that people are so positive and optimistic, the firm and the lateral, and everybody wants it to work so much
Mhm.
that there's not a kind of a scenario planning exercise about, well, what if it goes brilliantly? Great. What if
Mhm.
it goes medium? And what
Mhm.
if it doesn't? And I think if there was more strategic planning around those alternative options, as you would do with funding, with financial
Yep.
planning,
Yep.
you'd look at the different options and how you would pivot in each circumstance.
Well,
I
that's why the
think,
strategic plan for the recruitment is really important, I think. And listen, as a headhunter, anyone watching this will think, "Hold on a minute, Stephen, you didn't necessarily say all this when you were a headhunter," and I accept that. But now, having moved on, I can see how things work, and just recruiting people because the CV lands on your desk and going from there, I think is tricky. It's tricky.
now let's talk about the actual integration.
Yeah.
What does good integration look like? And I guess are there some real life stories that you've seen where integration's been done really well and been, even in scenarios of lateral partners who, the client base didn't turn up?
Well, I think I've sort of hinted at one where. Well, let's start with what good integration looks like. I'll come back
Yeah.
to examples.
Sorry, too many
So,
questions.
good integration, as I've already mentioned, needs a proper integration plan, and that's different from the business plan that's delivered as part of the lateral recruitment process. That business plan, by the time someone joins, could be a year out of date because they could have had 6 months' notice or a year's notice. It could be a year since they did that business plan. So the business plan needs to be looked at with the lateral, and then you look at it as to where you are on the day that the person joins, and start planning not just the client, but also the client transition or the new client introductions to the lateral from the firm, but really the internal integration and making sure that the lateral realizes that their internal partners are their potential clients as well, because they're not known to those internal partners, and they have to get to be known to them. And I had one lateral who said that he met, and he wasn't in a huge firm, but he met basically every partner in the first year. It took a lot of time, but he knows that was a great thing to do. So he really started to feel a little bit like part of the fabric of the firm, as opposed to just being in a room on his own or in a department. And I appreciate in a large firm that's trickier, but that's going to be looked at, and not just 100 days. 100
Mhm.
days is important, and helping also, and this comes through coaching, and we'll come on to that obviously, but helping laterals understand how to rebuild their practice. That is really key because a lot of laterals don't actually understand how their practice was built. It was built kind of osmotically in their previous firm. So
Mhm.
sometimes laterals who have moved more than once are in a better position because they've had that experience of rebuilding again, although you have to ask why they've moved more than once to have that experience. As I said previously, really giving the lateral headspace to talk about their insecurities and their vulnerabilities, and that's where the coaching comes in. Now, a lot of firms have internal coaches who do a lot of integration assistance, and that's absolutely fine. But I know, I haven't been doing this that long, but I can tell from a number of the coachees I've had, who have told me stuff that they would not tell an internal coach employed by the firm. They just wouldn't do it. I mean, one in particular must have asked me about 6 times if it was really confidential what he was about to tell me. And I said, yes, it is, unless you're about to tell me you've broken SRA rules or you've murdered someone, then yes, it is. And he told me something to do with his family and an issue which had come up, which the firm didn't know about. And we dealt with it. We looked at it and we came up with a plan. So
Mm,
the coaching, and I can't understand why law firms don't realize this, that they've spent a huge amount of money on recruiting people, millions of pounds.
mm,
Um, and yet they don't necessarily recognize that providing a coach um, for a tailored program costing nothing like that could mean that they get far more revenue out of that lateral, because that's what I should be judged on, as to whether that person is still there in a few years, but more importantly, whether they have generally seemed to be a success in the hire. I can't. We can't help people who are, have been recruited for completely the wrong reasons. It just all blows up. That's not something I can do much about. But helping, give a few more percentage points on the likelihood of success, and bringing it up from 50% of their likely billings to 60% of their hopeful billings. That's what, if we do that, then the firm's going to be having made a lot more money than they would have done otherwise.
and people will just be happier.
People will be happier and stay longer.
So,
And I think you said to me, in another forum, that a large percentage of the people you guys act for or against in terms of partnership exit issues are laterals who have
mm,
joined. Well, that says it all.
yeah, it's true. I mean, it's a very disruptive market at the moment in lots of
Mm,
different ways.
mm,
Whether it's laterals or PE, it's going to be a lot of
mm,
movement. And the periods for which partners and also associates are expecting to be at a firm is just a lot shorter. And it's a big investment. It's an emotional investment, it's a financial and a cultural investment for you and also for your clients who you hope will follow.
Do you think that? I don't think people join firms thinking they're going to stay for shorter. I don't think that happens. I think it's just how it works out. I think most people don't want to move. They don't, it's a pain in the backside. Even if you're going to get a load of money, it's a pain in the backside. And so you want people to, you're going to lose some people who will be hoiked off by the promise of more money. But you want people to be integrated properly, so they stay forever, if possible. And so, I try and say to firms that what we're doing now is the end part of the recruitment process, not some standalone coaching. It's the end part of the recruitment process, which we can help them to be integrated properly.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's essential. It's not like the SAS. You're not just parachuting them in and they're only in there
No,
to perform
no.
a mission. You
Mm.
want them to stick around and be part of
Yeah,
the long-term
yeah,
future and grow as part of the whole organism. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I can see the absolute importance of that, the integration, the strategy, the due diligence, the integration, and also the
Mm.
importance of a coach or a counsellor, or just, especially at a leadership level, a partner level, just having, you have to deal with a lot. You're not like
Mm,
just
mm,
on the front line with client work anymore. You're doing management, you're doing
mm, mm,
finance, etc. And actually having the headspace to reframe,
mm.
understand, and reinterpret and reframe what's going on and your response to it in a
Yeah,
sort of how to look at something from a wise and empathetic way.
yeah,
I mean, that's gold dust.
yeah. I agree.
But look, thanks so much. It's been
That's a
really interesting.
pleasure.
I love chatting with you about these things. And would you like to just give us a quick plug for your brilliant, fairly recently launched podcast, which I love? I know you've had some big names and then some less good names recently, but yeah, I know you had Karen Seward on pretty recently, which was really interesting.
Yes, we had Karen. So yes, it's called Beyond Billables: Lessons from Top Law Firm Partners. I'm extending it from just partners to one or two other areas, and I want to have some GCs on actually, which I think will be as interesting.
That's great.
So yes, please, it's on all. as they say, Apple, all the usual podcast channels are on YouTube. And you have been a guest, and hopefully that will be seen. I don't know whether it'll be seen before or after when this comes out, but yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks. If you stuck with us to the end, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed it. Do get in touch with Stephen. He loves talking about these issues about, lateral partner hires and how to make it a success and how to integrate and how to support through coaching. And he is a great person, and he's just a good person to bounce ideas off, etc. So please do get in touch. I'm sure you don't mind that, Stephen.
No, I don't.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for watching. And if you've enjoyed it, as they say, like, subscribe, comment, forward, etc. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.